do you want to talk first about your book? Because I guess that's the breaking news, is that you published a book.
Sure, however you want to start is fine.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So it's a book about, I guess, basically advice towards people who have yet to begin law school, right?
Right. Basically, I wanted to talk about things that I wish I had known before I started law school, specifically the summer before. Like you're committed to going to law school and you don't know what's going to happen in the program. What should you know? What should you think about before enrolling in the program? And for me and my story, it was when I started law school, because I had no background to know what was happening, my first semester was really tough. And I was able to figure out what was going on, but it wasn't until the spring. And so a lot of students have difficulties in that way, and it makes a difference for your GPA and job prospects and so forth, but it's fairly difficult to rebound because you only have 6 semesters of the program. And so to have a first semester to be a tough one because you don't know what's really happening, and everybody's smart, everybody's working hard. And so those really aren't the questions. The questions really are about how to strategically get into this program. And for example, the writing is different. And so I was an English major in college, and when I came to law school and someone told me that I had to learn to write differently, I didn't believe them because it didn't seem correct. I had been writing and doing well on papers my entire academic career. And so for someone to suggest that I needed to do something different for my writing, it didn't sound right. And so same thing with a lot of students. And so you don't really realize that you actually have to do something different until the end, when you actually realize you didn't perform the way you wanted to perform. So I wanted to talk about that and give students some ideas about how to approach law school. And even like my vocabulary list, for example, just if you can think back to like when you read your first case, so many things in that case, you just didn't know what they meant. And nowadays you read a case, see, it's like second nature to you. But back then, when you first read that case, what does it mean for the court to affirm something? Like, it sounds important, but as before you came to law school, you didn't know what that meant. Or even just the numbers of the case by itself would have meant something. And those are things that no one really told me before I started law school. And so that would have helped the learning curve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just some background information. So where did you grow up and where'd you go for college and law school?
Well, I was born and raised in a small town in eastern North Carolina called Red Springs. It's in Robeson County, North Carolina. And then I attended North Carolina Central University for undergraduate work and for law school. After that, I worked for a nonprofit doing foreclosure defense work for a number of years. And then I opened up my own firm in Raleigh, North Carolina. I practiced there for a few years. And then I went back to our alma mater and I taught at Central's Law School for 7 years. And one of the things that I was able to do there was we had what we call a bridge program. It was for undergraduates who would come to the law school and they would take a class with me and learn about their first year experience. And so we gave them a snapshot into that. And some of them loved it and went on to, actually, they're now lawyers. It's been so long, but others realized they didn't like it and they decided to do something else. And they've had successful careers doing something else. And so, of course, that's also good. You should, if law school is not for you, you should know that. And so that was the beginning of me prepping students for law school. So it's been a journey. I think 2009, was the first time I worked with students who were interested in going to law school. And so it's been a long time coming, just the book and the activities that we're engaging in now. We have a pre-law boot camp that we offer as well. It starts next week. So it's a week-long program that we're hosting that's going to give students access to case briefing and just a nice intensive look at what law school is about for those who are willing to engage in that process. And I'm excited because I think it's going to really make a difference in the students' ability to walk into class on that first day, being prepared, understanding what the cases how to read a case, how to brief a case, how to outline. All those things are different. And it's interesting because we have so many people in a room who are all smart. Everybody who gets admitted to law school is smart. They all have ambition. They all want to work hard. And so figuring out how to stand out in such a group actually is not about that. It's not about being smart because everybody's smart. It's actually about strategy. And so that was the thing I didn't know so that's the thing I want to teach. And starting them out early, and we do a month before classes start, so they have some time to digest the vocabulary, the style that the cases are coming in. And so if they take advantage of this opportunity, they're going to walk away really being prepared for the first of law school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely so important. And I think I read somewhere that you said you were the first person in your family to go to law school. Is that right? Yeah. Was your family supportive of your idea to go to law school?
Yeah, I have family members who've done other things in their careers. It's just if I wanted advice about our profession, then I didn't have anyone to turn to. I would say in retrospect, I probably could have utilized mentors better, but I think that's the thing that most young people don't do a very good job of. And so, your parents don't necessarily have to be attorneys, because there are attorneys who you and I know would love nothing better than to spend time talking about themselves. And so I had an opportunity to actually get to know lawyers. It's when you're younger, it's intimidating for one to come up to a lawyer and to say, hey, I want to talk to you about your career, not really realizing that they would actually love that. And so I did walk into it fairly blindly. And that's what most students do. So it's something that we can work on, because it's something that, like, now a lot of my students are second generation and third generation students, law students. And so they naturally had access to someone telling them things that they could do to prepare for the program. And so on day one, they were at an advantage.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you were at NC Central for college, did they have any sort of pre-law group or anything where you could potentially meet attorneys or get some mentoring?
Yeah, well, and I was a part of some things in undergrad, but I don't think that, I certainly know I didn't utilize it to the fullest. And for example, at that time, my mentor, our chancellor, was an attorney. And so, but you don't know what you don't know, especially when you are very new to the process. So not even really knowing what the questions to ask. So one of the things that I think I've found is most lawyers aren't the greatest at explaining the sort of things that we talk about as far as the introduction to law school, because it's now so ingrained in you. Like, it's actually difficult for a seasoned attorney to think back to the time that they didn't know how to read a case. And that actually it's ironic, but I know that from teaching third year students. Sometimes I talk to third year students, and one of the activities in class is that we try to get them to break down stuff. And sometimes they find it difficult just to break down legal principles into layman's speech. And I sort of remind them that 2 years ago, you didn't know these things. And so, but it's just one of those things. Once you become ingrained, once you become a part of this process, you actually, knowing statutory interpretation is just secondhand to you, when the truth of the matter is you didn't know what that meant 3 years ago. And so when you talk to a lawyer who's been practicing for 10, 15 years, it's very, very difficult for them to break things down to the level that an undergrad would actually need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. I remember when I was like a first year law student, and then I was interning for a judge, I had no idea what a motion for summary judgment was. It was like a totally different language to do, to jump into this legal verbiage. So it is very confusing. But can you tell us a little bit more about your family, like what your parents do for a living?
Well, when I was growing up, my father, for good or for bad, when I was in high school, was my high school principal.
Okay. Oh, I'm having a little trouble hearing you. It's like your volume's coming in and out.
Okay. Well, I was saying that my father was my high school principal.
Oh,
And my mom at that time was a stay-at-home mom.
Hmm. I see. Oh, so were you always a good student then, since your dad was an educator?
Well, yes, and it was, I mean, there was a little natural pressure there, but certainly, I did well in school. I think more so because I wanted to, not necessarily because he was the principal. It was only the last 2 years that he was the principal. So before that, I mean, it was a series, but
Hmm. Yeah, I see. And let's see. So you did end up practicing in Red Springs for a while, right? Before you went to South Dakota?
yes, I did.
Yeah. What was that like to switch from working in Wake County, Raleigh, which is when I met you, versus, going back to your hometown?
Well, there were a lot of differences, and I'm not sure I appreciated all the differences, honestly, in the moment. There were differences in the way attorneys connect, and I think there were things that I didn't do, like with my colleagues, that I didn't know were wrong. For example, in Wake County, which is a bigger, busier, more metropolitan area, you go to court, you're done, you leave. And I actually remember a judge telling me that it was odd that when I was in Red Springs, a judge told me how it was strange that when I would finish my cases, I would leave instead of sort of hanging around and talking to other attorneys. And some of that could be interpreted as being unfriendly. And I didn't even realize that because I had started off being in a metropolitan area where no one just stood around after their case was over, they just left. So, but those sort of collegial relationships meant more. So that was something that, and I didn't pick up on that until years of being there. And so that was something that in retrospect, I wish I had picked up on, or even working with the clerks and just that natural Southern, you have to talk to you, we're going to talk to you about how your kids are. And that just wasn't what would happen when you would talk to a clerk in Wake County. That's just not what was expected. And so those things were different. The other thing I think was different was in my hometown, most of my clients would have been people who knew my family. And so someone would come into my office and they would say, "Oh, I know Mr. Peterkin," and they were referring to someone else. I'm thinking, I'm Mr. Peterkin, Yeah. And so that was something to deal with. It could be a good thing, of course, because you have a good reputation because someone knew someone in your family, but at the same time, you just establishing your own can be a little bit of a challenge because if someone who knew you as a child, they may have trouble seeing you now as a professional.
Yeah, that's right. I see. And then how did you wind up working at University of South
After a
Dakota?
couple of years of being there, I mean, I did miss academia. And so I started to explore opportunities. Initially, I wasn't willing to leave the state for a long time. I had family members that I wanted to stay connected with, and I just wasn't willing to leave. But it was a good time that I felt that it was okay to leave the state. And so I promised myself that I'll be open to opportunities. So these people from South Dakota just kept talking to me about this job. And I remember thinking, I might end up in South Dakota. And in the end, when I was weighing my options, it ended up being the thing that I wanted to do.
Hmm. I see. But was there some sort of like centralized like website where people can look for professor positions, or did you happen to know someone that reached out to you?
Can you hear me?
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Something seems to be going wrong here.
Oh yeah, I think something froze. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Okay. So I was asking, like, was there some sort of like centralized job listing website that you found the job on, or did someone reach out to you personally?
There's a national conference that meets annually that does like a series of faculty interviews for like, it's called the AALS. That's like the accreditation board for law schools. And so they'll have a national conference usually in DC where almost every law school in the country comes. And so it'll be like a massive job fair for law professors.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I've actually been there before because my ex-husband teaches at UNC Law School. So we went to that thing at the Wardman Park. So that's how you did it? You went there to the, what they call the meat market? Oh, okay. Well, that's great. I mean, I know how hard it is to get these professor positions. So congratulations. You beat out a lot of people, I'm sure, to get the job. So what classes do you teach?
I teach a second year class. It's called Legal Reasoning, which is about some aspects of the bar exam and the MPT, the performance test part of the bar exam, and it's also about enhancing their writing skills. And I also teach a third year class, which is specifically related to the bar exam, which focuses a little bit more on multiple choice questions. And now in the spring, I'll teach a class called Race in the Law.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. And do you already know what books you're going to be teaching from for that class?
No, I haven't picked the book yet. It's when I started to reach out to the publishers, it was sort of amazing how many books are about this subject. So I'm still going through the books.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping, and I'm open to recommendations because there are a lot of books to choose from, and a lot of really good books.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, there's definitely like this whole critical race theory that's become a more broader aspect of legal education. So, okay, well, would you like to talk more about your book? Like what gave you the ideas to make the book and how long did it take you to write that?
Well, there were two different versions that I was working on, and so the thing that I like to write about is explaining law, and whether that's explaining law to a non-lawyer or to a future lawyer, my writing sort of focus on that. So I actually started off with the book. I called it The Legal Love Story, and it was a fiction book, but it was designed for non-lawyers to learn their rights. And I wrote the book I drafted it in the story, basically the story of a couple and the things that they would go through in their relationship and in just life. And then I would explain what the legal answers were about it. So they would, for example, they would contemplate getting married and we discussed prenups. They would have a car accident and we would discuss personal injury. They would have a financial problem. We will discuss bankruptcy. And so I drafted that. And in the end, I sort of weird, but like when I was almost finished, I decided I didn't like it. I didn't like the voice that it was being stated in because the stories were over the top. And so I scratched it. I didn't want to publish it. And so I put that aside completely in favor of this book because this is the voice that I wanted to come in. This book, and so it was for a different audience as well. It's to a very small audience. This book is not to the general public. It's specifically for someone who is ready to start law school, but it's also the first book in a series. And so it's called Law School Now. The next book is actually called Law School Multiples. And so I'm writing some multiple choice questions and teaching students the skills to understand how to answer the multiple choice questions. And then the third book is called Law School Maybe. And so that's a book for undergrads who are contemplating whether they want to go to law school or not. And so I help them think through the process about what is law school, because the truth of the matter is, which is a good thing, people are much more savvy now about how they spend money. And when I went to law school, and I think the trend is changing, but when I went to law school, if you had asked most of us why we went to law school, we couldn't tell you. If we had asked you, what do we want to do with our careers? We couldn't tell you. So we had basically committed to $100,000 in 3-year investment and actually didn't have any information. And nowadays, though, students are much more savvy about that. They're not willing to take out $120,000 of student loans and not know why they're doing it, which is a good thing. And so that book is called Law School Maybe I'm working on, because they need real information. I do worry about what law school is about what the career prospects for lawyers are, that sometimes are not true or accurate. I've sometimes in our profession, people want to be martyrs. And so I've seen lawyers just be very negative towards what I call future law people, our future lawyers, and to be very negative and discouraging to them because that particular person didn't have a good experience. And I think that's not right. I want these students to think for themselves and to have good, accurate information. And personally, I think if you have a desire to go to law school, you should go to law school and you should commit to being successful because that's who you are, not because of the school you attend or not because of any other factor. It's who you are. And so there are people who are not satisfied with their legal degrees, but my theory is that if they had went to get a PhD in history, they also would not be satisfied because that's who they are. And you can't blame the law school or blame whatever. You blame yourself. You accept personal responsibility. But I think that students just need to have a place to get accurate information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, so what made you decide that you wanted to go to law school?
Well, I was in that cliche of people who always said that because they quote unquote like to argue and didn't really know what they had to do with law school. And so when I went to college, that was my original plan. And of course, as I matriculated, I changed the plan significantly. I actually went into the teacher education program. And so I was trained to be an English teacher. Up until my last semester of college, I trained to be an English teacher. And at the very last semester, I decided I didn't want to be a teacher anymore. And I wanted my original plan, which was to go to law school. So I switched all of my classes around so I could graduate on time. And I applied to law schools at the very end. It was basically a last semester of college decision to do that.
So you didn't work in between undergrad and going to law school?
I graduated from college in May and started law school in August.
And what was your experience like at NC Central? I mean, were there a lot of the same students that you already knew from college that you still hung out with?
No, and I think that was a surprise to me. I don't know why it was a surprise, but I don't know if it's the same anymore, but back then, our law school admitted very few undergrads from NCCU. And so it was actually a very different experience. And I don't think I was prepared for that. I kind of thought this is my safety net. This is where I've been, but it was actually a completely different experience. And so that surprised me for good or for bad. It was just different. And so I made new friends and it was competitive, but it was also collegial at the same time. And so I think that we do a pretty good job of mixing that. Of course, law school is competitive. Of course, you want to make the highest grade. One of the things that I found, though, is that the more I would explain legal principles to other people, the better I understood them. And so therefore, I still did really good on the exam. And so and many, many years later, now that I'm teaching, I've learned that that is actually a mental trick to get you to do better. Your ability to explain actually solidifies understanding. So we used to give an award for the most kind of like a congeniality award. And I won that award because I was known as a person who did not mind stopping and explaining something to my classmates. Now, I mean, I think I was nice, yes, but at the same time, me taking the time to explain this principle to you solidified that principle to me.
Yeah, that's great. So it sounds like you know everything about NC Central since you spent so many years there and then you also taught there. So like, would you tell prospective law students that NC Central is like a great law school to attend?
Well, I'm biased, so certainly I know the quality of the program. I do think that one of the things students have to consider is what their options will be considering what they want to do with their career. And I can tell you this from a colleague of mine who went to Harvard, and she was an associate dean when I was at Central. And we talked about what the differences were in her education and my education. And her answer, which I thought was perfect, her answer was the difference is the career services department. And so if you want to be a North Carolina attorney and you want to maybe practice in a small firm, do public interest work, you will have all the opportunities you've ever wanted by going to North Carolina Central University. And you'll get a great education, and that will work out well for you. Now, if you have an interest in doing other things, in which could include getting much bigger firms, going for the federal clerkships, for example, they are generally looking to other law schools first. Not always. We have plenty of examples of students who've gotten federal clerkships and who've gotten jobs in Skadden Arps, which is the largest firm in the world. We have plenty of examples, but those are generally the exceptions and not the rule. So it depends on what you want to do with your degree.
I see. And when you were in law school, what did you do during the summers, or where did you work?